ពីសាកលវិទ្យាល័យAdelaide នៃប្រទេសអូស្ត្រាលីវាគ្មិនបន្ទាប់របស់យើងគឺលោកស្រី Mary Ken លោកស្រីគឺជាអ្នកជំនាញថ្នាក់តំបន់ផ្នែកជំនាញភាពមានការងារធ្វើនិង TVET លោកស្រីមានបទពិសោធន៍ជាង20ឆ្នាំជាមួយនឹងរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលគ្រឹះស្ថាន TVET និងតំណាងកម្មករនយោជិតផងដែរលោកស្រីបានចូលរួមចំណែកក្នុងការអភិវឌ្ឍគោលនយោបាយកម្មវិធីធំនិងភាពជាដៃគូអន្តរជាតិនៅ16ប្រទេសរួមមានចក្រភពអង់គ្លេសប្រទេសចិនក៏ដូចជាអាហ្វ្រិកខាងត្បូងផងដែរមុននឹងចូលបម្រើការនៅ ILO លោកស្រីបានបម្រើការជានាយករងនៅមហាវិទ្យាល័យ Cardiff និង Wall ដោយបានប្រែក្លាយជាស្ថាប័នវិជ្ជាជីវៈដ៏ធំមួយក្នុងចំណោមស្ថាប័នផ្សេងទៀតនៅចក្រភពអង់គ្លេសលោកស្រីក៏ធ្លាប់បានធ្វើការជានាយកនៅ HPLC ផងដែរផ្ដោតទៅលើបញ្ហាកង្វះជំនាញក្នុងវិស័យអតិភិបលោកស្រីមានជំនាញដូចជាការបញ្ជា gender ពិការភាពនិងគោលនយោបាយឧស្សាហកម្មបៃតងហើយក៏បានទទួលសញ្ញាបត្រថ្នាក់អនុបណ្ឌិតផ្នែកគ្រប់គ្រងធុរកិច្ចផងដែរសម្រាប់វាគ្មិនទី3របស់យើងគឺលោកបណ្ឌិតឆនឌីណាលោកបណ្ឌិតគឺជានាយកមជ្ឈមណ្ឌលស្រាវជ្រាវអភិវឌ្ឍសេដ្ឋកិច្ចនិងពាណិជ្ជកម្មនៅវិទ្យាស្ថានបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលនិងស្រាវជ្រាវដើម្បីអភិវឌ្ឍកម្ពុជា CDRI លោកបណ្ឌិតគឺជាសេដ្ឋវិទូដែលបានជ្រើសរើសដោយគណៈកម្មការអឺរ៉ុបក្រោមកម្មវិធី Marie Sklodowska Curie Action ទៅកាន់កិច្ចប្រជុំ The Seven Lindo Label Laureate Meeting នៅក្នុងប្រទេសអាល្លឺម៉ង់លោកបណ្ឌិតបានបញ្ចប់ការស្រាវជ្រាវថ្នាក់ក្រោយបណ្ឌិតពីសាកលវិទ្យាល័យ Bordeaux នៃប្រទេសបារាំងនិងបានបង្រៀនមុខជំនាញ Econometrics ហើយនិង Statistics នៅទីនោះផងដែរជាចុងក្រោយសូមស្វាគមន៍ដល់លោកម៉ាសុភាលោកបានចូលបម្រើការនៅធនាគារអភិវឌ្ឍអាស៊ីនៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ2013ហើយបម្រើការងារជាមន្ត្រីគម្រោងជាន់ខ្ពស់ទាក់ទងនឹងការអប់រំនិងជំនាញនិងចូលរួមជាអ្នកដឹកនាំបេសកកម្មសម្រាប់គម្រោងនិងកម្មវិធីក្នុងវិស័យអប់រំនិងជំនាញផងដែរមុនពេលបម្រើការជាមួយនឹង ADB លោកម៉ាសុភាធ្លាប់ជាអ្នកគ្រប់គ្រងកម្មវិធីជាតិនិងជាប្រធានទីប្រឹក្សាបច្ចេកទេសសម្រាប់អង្គការអន្តរជាតិខាងការងារដែលយើងហៅកាត់ថា ILO ពីឆ្នាំ1995ដោយបម្រើការនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជានិងបង់ក្លាដេសចន្លោះពីឆ្នាំ2009ដល់ឆ្នាំ2011ជាកិច្ចចាប់ផ្ដើមយើងនឹងមានការធ្វើបទបង្ហាញពីវាគ្មិនចំនួន2រូបមុននឹងឈានដល់កិច្ចពិភាក្សាវាគ្មិនទាំង2រូបនឹងមានរយៈពេល15នាទីដើម្បីធ្វើបទបង្ហាញដែលប្រធានបទទី1នឹងត្រូវធ្វើបទបង្ហាញដោយឯកឧត្តមបណ្ឌិតអ៊ុំច័ន្ទមនោដែលប្រធានបទទី1នេះគឺតាក់ទងទៅនឹងបម្រែបម្រួលទីផ្សារការងារនៅកម្ពុជាដែលយើងផ្ដោតទៅលើតម្រូវការនិងការផ្គត់ផ្គង់កម្លាំងពលកម្មសូមគោរពអញ្ជើញឯកឧត្តមចាប់ផ្ដើមបទបង្ហាញបាទ
Once again, thank you for all participants for this for coming for this conference for the second days. So I would like to take these opportunities to talking about the dynamics, labor market dynamics in Cambodia, looking at the labor demand and labor supplies. Given that I will keep the presentation within 15 minutes as much as possible. So I will talk through some stylized facts, looking at the labor demand projections, labor supply projections, also some key takeaway and observations, basically for policy formulation as well. In terms of the stylized fact itself, we looking at the structure of the labor market in general terms, both theoretically, looking at the regional labor markets and Cambodian labor market itself. But I will keep Cambodian labor market short because we have been talking about it since yesterday. So I keep only the sort of important informations. In terms of the structures of the labor market from the economic point of view, you have the labor demand and there's the labor supply. For basically, for the demand for labor from the economic kind of understanding, it's the derived functions, which mean that the firm hires employees to produce goods and services, and that to maximize basically their profits. So in this context, there are some sort of indicators for the labor demand in terms of employment creation, working condition, and skill needs that link to sort of skill needs, economic activities, occupations, and also sort of establishment characteristic and so on. On another hand, for the labor supply, we have sort of classify into the so-called working age populations and classify into three categories. The first one is employed person, unemployed person, and the person who basically outside the labor force. And also, if all of that together, it produces the so-called the GDP and also produce sort of the value added and productivities. I'll give you a little bit of snapshots in terms of regional labor markets. If you're looking at the share of employment by economic activity in Asia, we can see Singapore, Brunei, Jerusalem, Malaysia have some sort of high proportions of employment in services, while Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar still depending on agriculture and industry, where we have only roughly 36% for Cambodia in services. Also, the unemployment rate across Asia, we have seen that Cambodia has been sort of manageable unemployment rate, while some other country, including let's say Laos, Myanmar, still in the unemployment still low, even though this data is basically in 2018, 19, 20. Another thing is that for the working age population, we have seen that Indonesia, which is a large of populations, the working age population in Indonesia is basically higher than other countries, followed by the Philippines, Thailand, and also in Vietnam. The distributions of the worker by education attainment, you can see Singapore have large proportions of higher and upper education completed, basically more than 50%, roughly 69%, while Brunei, Jerusalem, Malaysia, and also Philippines also have sort of a significant proportion. While Cambodian, you can see the primary educations and lower secondary education completed share the significant proportions. We've been talking yesterday a lot that touch on sort of issues in Southeast Asia itself. So I just want to mention a little bit because we have that's led to our panel discussion as well. So some of the issues is basically the demographic shift in the regions, some difference of income differential. Climate change has been an issue in terms of employment transition as well. Also the technologies and automations. If we're looking at the demographic landscape in Cambodia, we've been talking about demographic dividends. So here I like to show you some projections from 1980 to 2050 in terms of the inverse dependency ratio. In such case, the inverse dependency ratio means that if the trend is going up, there's a large workforce available for dependents. So if you look at Cambodia, the red line, the red dots, you can see there's increase from 1996 until 2048 and slightly go down a little bit in 2050, while other countries, including Thailand, Republic of Korea, Malaysia, and Japan, is already goes down. This means that those countries basically will need more labor in their economies. In terms of economic landscape, I think we talked a lot yesterday as well. We've been a structural change in terms of there's a mobility from agricultural sectors to industry sectors and service sectors. We have seen the stable sort of growth in agricultural sectors, which roughly around 1%, while the industry and service sectors grow. For the industry sector, grows at 8.6% by 2025, and for service sector, it's roughly 5.6%. If you're looking at these proportions, we'll see that in 2023, the agricultural sector accounts for 31%, while industry 30%, and we have seen the share proportion increases in service sector to up to 40%. However, if you compare the productivity by within the region, we have seen Cambodia is still have the lower productivity than other countries, including Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Thailand, which our sort of export competitors. For the employment landscape, I just bring only one thing: the employment to population ratio. We've seen the a steady sort of employment to population ratio across years in 2007, around 83 to 84%. However, we've seen the significant gap between the employment ratio in terms of male and female. It has been fluctuated, but the numbers of men engaged in employment has been higher than female. For the working age population by education level, we've been discussing yesterday as well. Cambodia has been dominantly by primary education, which reflects within the occupational levels, which means the service for the skill level 2 and 1 has been dominated among the labor force, including service and sales, agriculture, craft, trade-related workers, plant machinery operator, and elementary occupations. So for the employment landscape as well, we're looking at sort of we have estimated for agriculture, the estimated number declined by 12.2% in 2003, and then go to minus 3.5 in 2024, while other sectors, including services and industry, growth at for service sector is 3.1%, while at the industry is 1.9%. So this is a core for these presentations, but this projection has been ongoing projections. So first of all, we're looking at the labor demand projections. We review the literatures and identify the appropriate methodologies, and I will give you a brief result as well. We basically focus this labor demand by looking at sector level, but for the occupational and skill projections, we still working on it. We use sort of other methodologies, but I'm not going through all these kind of techniques for estimations, including all put in here. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the main methodology that we use is the autoregressive integrated moving average. It's called ARIMA, with a top-down approach. After reviewing all of those model, we select this one because it has advantage with the data itself and is allowed to provide more kind of robust finding. So I will go through all this kind of technical notes. Okay, I will go to, okay. For in this model, we estimate by sectoral level, including agriculture, industry, government, construction, services, foods, where also the wholesale, retail, ICTs, and real estate, using sort of different set of variables that use for the estimations, including GDP, FDI, wages, regulatory quality, export, internet penetration, and so on. This is a subset of data set that we use. Okay, first of all, we estimate the GDP growth. Looking at the total real GDP growth within 24 to 2030, the estimate would be 6.4%, while the industry sectors, while the agricultural sector will grow 1.1%. For industry sectors, will grow at 8.6%. Other important sector, including construction sector, could be coming back, while the service sectors grow at 5.7% on average. Wholesale, retail, and information communication also have a higher growth in this estimate. If you look at the numbers of employments, I would not go through all the detail, but I just want to highlight the total employment within this same period, 24 to 2030, roughly around 2.5%. This indicates that we have maintaining the moderate growth compared to the past trend. Also, the industry sectors would grow at the rate of 4.7% on average. Construction is, even though we have seen, we estimate the proportions of the GDP growth roughly 5%, but the employment itself is still at 0.9%, while the service sector is only 3%. For the labor supply projection, we also have sort of reviewing the models, methodologies, and the data used for the projection as well. So the first one we're looking at, what's involved in the projection is that we're looking at the annual birth rate, poverty, and fertility rate. So we have seen a decline in sort of fertility rate by become from 3.79 to 2.8 life per woman, and we have seen the progressively sort of in 2013 to 2020 and declining a little bit till 2023. In terms of death and mortality rate, we have seen slight high up a little bit in 2021 because of, let's say, COVID, but we have seen the progress in terms of the numbers, so that reflects the sort of public health, economic development, and others social welfares. We use sort of this model for the labor supply forecasting projections. In the projection itself, we have to project sort of a population projection. We use the cohort components approach, and by integrating numbers of variables, including age, genders, education attainment, and also including the annual fertility and mortality rate as well. Oops, sorry. And for the potential labor force projection, we use the so-called stock flow models and estimate the entire entry and to exits from education, grade, and years. Okay. So we use different sets of data sets, including general population census, CSES, UNDESA, Barley, and EMIS, which is Education Management Information System. We compared our estimate with different set of estimates, including the National Institute of Statistics, UNDESA. We have seen a similar trend, especially with the National Institute of Statistics estimates and our estimates. But for UNDESA, it's a little bit higher, because the thing is that the UNDESA also include labor migrations into this projection. That's why it has slightly higher now in number. For the estimation, we're looking at 4 different sets of scenario. The first one, when we're looking at the constant unemployment rate. So we have seen the steady unemployment rate go up to let's say 46.4 in 2021, and because due to COVID-19, there's high up, and it's going back to 40,000 in 2030s with a constant unemployment rate. However, if the increase in demand for skilled workers and we have done nothing in terms of improving skill and upskilling the workers, so unemployment rate could increase to 113,000 by 2030s, which is lead to a long-term condition sort of structural employments that impacts the growth of the country. However, if we provide sort of skill for workers, so in a sense that there's an increment of skilled workers, so unemployment decrease to 25,000 by 2030s, which we also estimate the labor force projection by education attainment by comparing the result with the Barrelli models, which is one of the well-known estimates projection for the labor force by education attainment. So we have seen the similar result comparing to the Barrelli kind of estimate. But the thing is that with the primary education, we have seen a slightly decline for our estimates, while other lower secondary, upper completion, higher education, we have a similar trend. I'm not going to go through all of this scenario one by one, but in terms of scenario 1, we're looking at the constant survival for educations. For the second one, we estimate by improving survival from educations, which means that we assume that there's a promotion, reputations, and the dropout remain the same, but the dropout from general education do not return to formal education. But 99%, we assume that 99% of the dropout would directly enter into the market and 5% stay out of the market. For the third scenario, we assume the first condition and the second condition the same, but we assume that 50% enter into the labor market and 55% enroll into TVET and 25% remain outside the labor force. And all the 25 drop out, the grade 10 and 12 would enroll in TVET next year. For the fourth one is the result that we improve the survival from the general education, including TVET. In this stage, I want to conclude from the scenario 1 to scenario 4 is that the stocks of students by 2029 and 2030 for upper educations, completions, and higher education increase in terms of number, which is higher than for the over projection for scenario 1, 2, and 3, which means that they remain in educations and that interpret into a more skilled worker after they graduate. Okay. So by comparing the number, we're looking at the number of the average numbers of employment labor demand and supply. We have seen sort of the labor surplus, but not significantly. However, the key takeaway from this would be we've been discussed a little bit on this as well, but to some extent, the issue that we need to consider is sort of the structural labor market issue, including economic infrastructures, demographic productivity, informal sectors, and skill mismatch, and other things that can come up along the way, including labor recruitment situations, labor market informations, also the ongoing and the sort of labor market shocks or economic shocks, including labor market impact by COVID-19, innovations, and other regional and global trends that might impact on labor supply and demand. For some policy recommendation, I think this is try to highlight some policies that might affect the demand and supply, including strengthens the early educations, expanding integrated programs, encourage the lifelong learning and upskilling, improving quality access to secondary and higher educations, incentive alignment of education with the market needs. I think I will leave it for now because we probably need to discuss in the panel sessions later. Thank you.
សូមអរគុណដល់អាដាមបណ្ឌិតសម្រាប់បទបង្ហាញដ៏គួរឲ្យចាប់អារម្មណ៍នេះអាដាមបណ្ឌិតបានលើកឡើងអំពីសក្តានុពលទីផ្សារការងាររួមទាំងការព្យាករណ៍អំពីតម្រូវការក៏ដូចជាការផ្គត់ផ្គង់កម្លាំងពលកម្មដែលការនេះបានបង្ហាញពីនិន្នាការសំខាន់នៃកម្លាំងពលកម្មនៅក្នុងកម្ពុជាក៏ដូចជាបញ្ហាប្រឈមក្នុងការធ្វើឲ្យមានភាពបន្ស៊ីគ្នារវាងការផ្គត់ផ្គង់កម្លាំងពលកម្មនិងតម្រូវការក្នុងទីផ្សារសូមអរគុណអាដាម